Hello, everyone. My name is Brian Field, and I'm an area coordinator at the University of Richmond in the Office of Residence Life and Undergraduate Student Housing. And I am excited to participate in this year's Virginia ACUHO-i Virtual Intern Summit. With that said, I hope you are healthy. I hope you are doing well. And I appreciate you taking the time to watch my video and some of the other videos on this page for your own knowledge, for your own professional development. And I hope there is something that you can take away from this whole experience. So before I begin, let me switch on over to my presentation. Let me share my screen real quick. All right. So my presentation for you today is job search, should you conference? I wanted to present on this topic because when I was going through grad school and starting my job search out of grad school, I was looking for a residence life and housing job. And with that, there was this kind of underlying pressure that I had to go to a large conference for my search. I ended up going to the placement exchange, and there was this kind of underlying notion that this was the only way you could get a residence life job. Everyone was doing it, so I had to too, right? So I wanted to share this presentation and my reflection and my thoughts with you to help you make it a better or an informed decision on if going to a large professional conference search to get your first professional job outside of grad school, after grad school, if that decision is right for you and what other options there are. So first off, I want to kind of share with you a little bit about my journey and my search at that time. So at that time, I was graduating from Virginia Tech with my master's. Virginia Tech is located in Blacksburg, Virginia. And my personal job search was consisted on mostly the East Coast. I do have some family up in Northern Virginia, and so I wanted to stay somewhat close to them. And so I was primarily looking Virginia and up. I did have some outliers. I did have some jobs that I was applying to that were located in the Midwest or on the West Coast, but there were mostly jobs on the East Coast. And so I went to TPE, the placement exchange, and in that year, it was in Indianapolis, Indiana. So me and a couple of my friends from the cohort traveled 7.5 hours via car from Blacksburg, Virginia to Indianapolis. I went through the whole experience. I went through the whole weekend of events, going through first round and second round interviews there. And I ended up landing the job that I currently have at the University of Richmond in Richmond, Virginia. And so when looking at the geographic location of that, that is only 3 hours away from where I originally was at Blacksburg. So looking back, it was kind of funny that I drove 7.5 hours to Indiana to get a job that was only 3 hours away. And so when I think back to that experience, I was kind of asking myself, I always ask myself, was it worth it? Was it worth going all the way to Indianapolis to find a job 3 hours down the road? And for me personally, I think it was. I'm a very indecisive person. And so going through that whole process, interviewing with all those schools and talking to all those people, I was able to come to the conclusion that University of Richmond was the best place for me. And I don't think I would have, gotten that experience any other way. And so for me, that was worth it. It was worth going to TPE and talking to all those institutions. But no, hindsight is 2020. I could have done it differently and maybe gotten the same result. So that's a little bit about myself. So in the presentation, I'm going to go over the pros and cons of going to a large conference search, choosing the right method for you, what makes sense for what you are looking for, what questions you should ask yourself, and then at the end, being prepared for your search, whether you're going to a conference or not. I have some tips and tricks that were given to me that I would like to share with you. So first off, the pros and cons of searching at a conference. I think that's a great place to begin. So the benefits of searching at a conference placement exchange or a conference search is number one, it's a large gathering of employers in one place, especially if you are conducting a national search. This is super convenient for someone who is looking more widely across the United States or wherever you're searching, it kind of brings everyone in one place. You can have all those interviews in one place in one time. It's very efficient, right? And so ultimately, it is convenient. The time, it's a couple days long. You can knock it all out at once. You can be in the mindset and that mental space to do your search. You can, you know, get in the mood for, okay, I am on interview mode. I am ready to go. And then once you're all done, you're kind of out of it and you can kind of take a breather. So that can be helpful for some people. I have found, and it's a thing in these placement exchanges, these conference searches, that there is a support system built into the process. So there are volunteers, there are professional staff that can help you. They have printers, they have mints, they have resume consultants, they have the resources there that you're kind of paying for when you're going to this search, that can be very beneficial for you if you're doing a search for the first time. And then ultimately, the whole process can jumpstart your search. You can walk away with the weekend of events and have a clear path forward of what's going on, right? You can walk away from doing all these interviews and knowing, okay, these are my top 3 places. This is my next step moving forward. I know what I'm doing, right? And so that can be very helpful. It can definitely jumpstart your search and give you a more clear path on where to go next. So on the flip side, the challenges of searching at a conference is, number one, is definitely more of an extroverted space. I myself am an extrovert. I love talking to people. So for me, I was living. It was great. I felt really energized and I was able to connect with all these people and I was on a roll, right? But for a lot of friends that I've talked to who are more introverted, they're like, man, that was so draining. I am just so exhausted. And so going to a placement exchange, going to a conference search, know that if you are more introverted, that could be a very draining and tiring and exhausting experience. So that might be a super hard challenge for you if you need to keep your energy up, if you need to do other things that to make you successful, to put your best foot forward. It can be costly. I'll talk a little bit more about costs later on in the presentation, but it can be costly depending on where the conference is, how many, how expensive that city is, right? How much food is, how much housing is, and if there are people around you, if you're going with a cohort, can you share an Airbnb together, or are you going solo, right? So all that can be costly depending on a lot of different factors. And again, I'll talk about that in a little bit. And then ultimately, also a big con can be you might walk away with not meeting your expectations for what you were hoping to get out of that conference. So I was able to walk away with a good, clear understanding of where I wanted to be and where I wanted to go. But some people in the process, they interview with all these people. They don't like any of the jobs that they interviewed for, or vice versa, right? They just didn't gel and they didn't get any second round or on-campus offers. And that happens, right? And so your expectation of, okay, I'm going to go to TPE, I'm going to go to this conference search, I'm going to walk away with so many opportunities in front of me. If that doesn't happen for whatever reason, if you're having a bad weekend, you're having a bad interview day, or you just don't gel with that institution, that you can walk away not meeting those expectations that you've set. So that is a huge con that you can consider. So given those pros and cons, let's talk about what you should consider, choosing if you should go to a conference or not for your search. So the questions that you should ask yourself is, where are you searching? Are you searching nationally? Are you searching more regionally? Or is there a specific state that you are looking for? If you're only searching for Virginia, right? Does it make sense to go to a conference out in California, right? Or in my case, Indiana, right? To get a job in Virginia. The larger your search, the more it makes sense to go to a conference search, right? What type of jobs are you looking for? Housing and residence life at TPE or other conferences, there are a lot of opportunities for housing and residence life. Are you looking for a student activities job or a Greek life job or a job in student conduct, right? Those jobs, depending on what you're looking for mostly, may or may not be supported by the conference, TPE or otherwise, that you are looking for. A lot of them are, but you have to do that work beforehand to determine, okay, does it make sense? Am I getting the most bang for my buck to go to this conference to jumpstart my search? And then lastly, how much does it cost? Does it make sense to spend that money to go to this space? So first, where are you searching, right? Nationally, I have been mentioning this, the Placement Exchange is a great conference to search for nationally. It's well established in partnership with NASPA. And so I have included the websites on all of these. But the Placement Exchange is a great wide national search that's very well established. It's been going on for years. There's also an ACPA Career Central that is more online, but I know there have been opportunities in the past to do that in person. So that might be another opportunity for you to connect with a bunch of employees across the board. If you're looking for regionally, look at whatever that region's association is. So for example, if you're looking in the Southeast, maybe CUHO, the Southeast I wrote it down, Southeast Association for Housing Offices. So maybe looking at that conference may be a good step for you to search for your job. This past year, they started back up the CUHO placement. And so that was a really great opportunity if you are looking for a more small scale, but similar experience to TPE to get a job that is in the Southeast, right? There's also OPE, which is the Oshkosh Placement Exchange, which more caters to the Midwest. And so that's the ope.org. So again, looking at the regional conferences, what do they have already established that might be a better fit for you to do your job search? If it's just in a region, pinpoint and highlight that region and go there. If you're looking for locally or just a specific institution, if you're like, I want to work at the University of Richmond, go to that specific institution's job website. Reach out to them. Hey, are you planning on going to TPE? Are you planning on going to CUHO? Kind of do that front work to do your little research of okay, are these institutions the ones I'm interested in? Where are they going to be? Or do I just reach out to them individually and do that? Of course, a good jumping off point is Higher Ed Jobs. If you go there, it is a great website that you can kind of break it down by region, by state, by specific institution. And so you can kind of start there to see, okay, what are the jobs that I'm available? How widespread is it? And which method should I choose for my search, whether it's individual, regionally, or nationally? So you also want to consider what type of job you're searching for. So if you're looking for housing and residence life, like I said, a lot of them go to the Placement Exchange, TPE, or CUHO, which is a housing entity. Those are some examples, not all of them, but there are some. If you're looking for a Greek life, start at AFA, which is the Association for Fraternity and Sorority Advisors. Conduct is ASCA, Association for Student Conduct Administration. There's NOTA for orientation, NERSA for rec sports. All of those, depending on the year, depending on how many jobs, they can be present at the Placement Exchange. But sometimes they aren't, right? And so again, you want to do your work, do your planning to kind of look into that. If you're only looking at conduct jobs, start at the ASCA website and see what jobs have been posted, see if they're going to TPE, seeing if they're going to another regional conference, and then go from there, right? Doing the work beforehand can help you figure out how much it costs you in terms of like your time, your effort, your energy, your money to go to a larger conference. So kind of think about the type of job you are looking for and if they're going to be at one of these conferences that you're looking at. And then, of course, you want to consider how much all of this is, right? And so things to consider is the location of the conference. If you are all the way here in Virginia and you are going out to California for TPE, that's a plane ticket. Or I hope you weren't planning on traveling by car, right? But that's a plane ticket. That factors into your decision to go. Registration fee. I'm not certain how much the registration fee is, but taking a look at that and that cost, you can determine, okay, does this fit in with my budget? Am I going to be at a huge deficit if I pay this registration fee to do my job search? You have to consider that. Travel, like I mentioned before, are you carpooling? Are you driving? Are you taking the train? Are you taking an airplane? Whatever that looks like, figure out those costs too. Housing, lodging, are you staying in a hotel, Airbnb, things like that? How much? If a TPE is in New York City or even LA, that is considerably more than Indianapolis, Indiana. So you have to kind of consider all of that. And then of course, food. Some things and ways to save, you looking at location, choosing a conference that is close. For me, my conference was in Indiana, only 7.5 hours away. And so it was close enough for me to justify, okay, this is worth it. I can drive there, that's fine. If it's in your state, that's a huge plus, right? Because you don't have to go as far. Again, registration fee, ways to save with that is asking your department for scholarships, or asking your supervisor for using your professional development money to go to this conference. Travel, are you going to carpool with people? Can you get a really good deal on a flight? Do you have points saved up? Things like that. And housing. Can you get an Airbnb with everyone in your cohort? Can you just cram into this Airbnb? Can you share hotel rooms? How can you make it work? I know TPE or other placement exchanges, they have different systems set up so that you can connect with other people who are going to the conference. And so if you are looking for a roommate, you can go through their website and kind of find a roommate so that you can split the costs and save some money there. So there are those systems set up in place, but that's something to consider as well. Maybe an Airbnb a couple blocks away might be a little bit cheaper. My pro tip for this, for saving money, is look for an opportunity to bundle your conference experience with like an actual professional conference. For example, TPE is paired with NASPA, and so TPE happens right before. It happens like 3 or 4 days. And then NASPA happens right after. So what you might be able to do is ask your department, hey, I would like to go to NASPA for my professional development. Instead of paying for my flight or what have you on Friday, can I go out on Wednesday? And you can save money by flying out there a couple days earlier. They would pay for your flight and you would be there for the conference and you would pick up the rest of the tab. There are rules and regulations for this, but working with your supervisor, working with your department to maybe finagle something like that might be beneficial. Same thing with regional conferences. I know ACUHO, you can go to their placement exchange, and then that happens concurrently with the actual ACUHO conference. So it kind of overlaps and happens mostly at the same time. So that is also an option. So keeping that in mind, thinking about that, it's a way you can cut your costs down to make it worth your while. So the bottom line, when you're considering going to a conference, going to a placement exchange, the more boxes you check when considering a conference search, the more it makes sense to attend. If you have a wide search, if it's super close to you, and you've got a cohort of people who wants to share a hotel room with you, that's pretty awesome. That's a good deal, right? But if you have a very narrow search, you're only searching for these handful of institutions, and they're not going to be at TPE, or they're not going to be at this conference, and it's really far away from where you currently are, it might not make sense for you to go. So ask yourself those questions, and that can kind of help you choose and weigh the options, the pros and cons, and all that, whether it makes sense for you to go to the exchange, the conference search. So lastly, whether you decide to go to a conference search or whether you're doing a search on your own, you need to be prepared. And so these are some tricks, tips that I have for you all to consider. So no matter how you search, you can be prepared. So when you're beginning your search, my biggest thing, I'm a Virgo, so I am super organized, or I'd like to think I'm super organized. It makes sense in my head if I have a game plan, if I am planning things out ahead of time. So I am hyper organized when it comes to my job search. So at the beginning of your search, stay organized. What's been helpful to me in the past has been to make a spreadsheet. I have this Excel spreadsheet of all the institutions, um, and what the job is, how much it pays, what the deadline is, where the website is, and all this stuff. And then I keep track every step I go, right? Yes, I applied to this, I put a date and I highlight it. Oh, I got a first round interview. I put a date of when that is and I highlight it. Did I do my thank you notes, etc. Right? So it just helps me when I'm applying to all these jobs, 20 plus, whatever that looks like. You can kind of keep track of where you are with each position in each step of the way. For me, going to TPE, this may be a step too far in one direction, but what was helpful for me is I created a binder of all the institutions that I had interviews with. And so what I did was I just had, I went on Word, I went and did a quick search of all the institutions that I was going to. And so I made a list of, okay, where is the institution? What is the, what are some traits about them? Is it a large school? Is it a small school, public, private? What are its top majors? Like, what kind of students are you working with? Are they engineering students? Are they primarily business? Are they communication, the arts, whatever? I even put things down like their mascot and their school colors, right? So I can use that when I'm writing writing thank you notes after the interview. I can kind of throw in Go Spiders or something like that. And so it helped me, again, probably a step too far in one direction, but it helped me have this binder so that when I was in the interview process, when I was in the zone, in that mental space to go through all these interviews, I didn't really have to think about all of those little details. I can, right before an interview, I would just open that page, I would look through it. I had my notes down there of the questions that I wanted to ask, the nuances of the job that I was interested in, some things that I was hesitant about, all that stuff. I could just review it, go into the interview, and that helped me be prepared. The next point is practice interviewing, right? Even for this presentation, I had to practice a little bit. It helps if you're talking and saying these answers out loud. You're going to get a lot of questions that are the same and very repetitive. And so I have found that the first couple interviews are really kind of squeaky for me, just because you're kind of getting used to the words in your mouth. You're getting used to kind of talking in a certain way and giving these certain answers. And so by practicing with a stranger, by practicing with other people in the field, whether it's over Zoom or Skype or something like that, or in person with your supervisor, you can kind of think through these and they can ask you tough questions and you can kind of think on the spot so that later, if that question appears, you can kind of be prepared to say what you need to say, right? And feel comfortable. And that's all that it's about, is by practicing, you feel more comfortable in being in that space and sharing your experience. And you want to be the most comfortable and be the most you and authentic you to present. And by practicing, you can certainly do that. You can achieve that. My pet peeve for interviews on either side is people who don't have questions, right? Prepare thoughtful questions for your interviews. Have certain questions, at least 3, right? You can tailor it down if you run out of time, ask 1 or 2. If you have a lot of time, you have 3 or 4 questions, right? But prepare thoughtful questions that tells the interviewer that you are paying attention to their institution, that you're paying attention to their job. That tells them that, wow, you've done your research, you know what you're talking about, you've taken the time, and this was a really great question. I've never thought of that before, right? Um, the worst type of interviews that I have been in on the other side of the table is candidates who don't have any questions, right? And so sitting down and thinking of that, again, think of what a first round interview question would be. For your second round interview, think about a little bit deeper. What other things could you ask that are more round 2 type questions, etc. So be prepared with questions always. And then just if you decide to go to a conference search, make sure you schedule breaks. I know TPE specifically, they tell you, hey, when you're scheduling your interviews, make sure you put in breaks. Some colleagues, some friends that I've had, they're like, oh, no, it's fine. I want to be in the zone and I want to go through it. I think that is a mistake. Make your breaks, schedule breaks, just so that you have that mental break from talking, right? You can well, physically stop talking and kind of drink some water and have that break. But also have that mental break just to like decompress a little bit, right? Afterwards, you'll have time to go to the restroom. You have time to have a drink of water. You can have time to write your thank you notes, or you can jot down some notes from the interview that you were like, oh, I need to remember that, or oh, these are the people who I interviewed with. I need to remember their names, right? So it's really important that you take breaks, and that's up to your comfort level. If you want a half-hour break, an hour break, whatever that looks like to you, but that is key to being the best you during all these interviews. So one thing that often happens for me when I'm in my search is I always go to the end goal, right? When I am interviewing for these jobs, I'm like, ooh, I wonder what it would look like if I worked here. And I like just submitted my resume, right? And I'm like, I wonder what it would be like living here, or who my friends will be, or what this would look like. What would life look like there, right? And I always go to the end result, and then I kind of get trapped, right? Do I really want this job? Is this really right for me? Do I really want to live in the city? All of that. And that is not what you should do, right? You should consider some of that when you're applying. Don't apply for jobs you don't want, but keep in mind what step you are in the process. For example, I have to challenge myself to always remember that your cover letter and resume, when you first submit it, the goal of that is to get a first round interview. No one's going to hire you off of just your cover letter and your resume. They're not going to give you the job right off the bat, right? So the goal of your cover letter and resume is to get your first round interview. During your first round interview, your goal is to get the second round, right? Your first round, they're getting to know you a little bit more. You're getting interested in them a little bit more. It's kind of just like your basic meet and greet. And the goal of that is to get a second round interview. Don't throw all your cards down at once. Maybe put a little bit out at a time, so that they're interested and be like, wow, he said or she said something about this, and I want to hear more about that. So once you get your second round interview, that is a little bit more in depth. They might ask you some scenario questions. How would you react to if you were put in this position? What are some examples that you have dealing with this? All that stuff, right? And also for you, again, to get to know them a little bit more, asking questions like, what is the office culture like? What are some of my daily tasks? Things like that. So that's like, and the goal of your second round interview is primarily to get an on-campus, to go to that next step. Once you're on campus and once you go to that institution, that's when you're kind of experiencing it. Of course, you want to kind of do everything before your first and second round interviews, kind of sell yourself or present yourself and share your authentic self to the people at that institution so that they are interested in hiring you. But you're also considering, is this the right job for me? Look around and be like, can I see myself on this campus? Can I see myself working with these colleagues? And then you can ask yourself, okay, can I see myself working here? Does this make sense for my next step? Oftentimes I go from 0 to 100, and you really just have to pare it down. And so if the job search ever seems overwhelming to you, it's happened to me so many times. If the job seems overwhelming, kind of take a step back and consider each step of the process, and it may be a little bit more manageable to consider and to move forward with your process. So one final pro tip that I have for you, if you do decide to go to a conference style search, this was a pro tip that my supervisor in grad school gave to me. And I was like, this is really silly, this is really weird, but I'm gonna do it because I trust you and you told me to do it. But she told me to bring an extra pair of socks. And in the middle of the day, in the middle of your conference, change your socks. And the reason behind this is you are kind of in the moment, your feet may be sweating, you may feel uncomfortable, you may feel whatever, right? And so in the middle of the day, you change your socks, and it's kind of this feeling of freshness, right? I did this, I followed her advice, and I was like, this is so stupid. I'm putting socks in my bag. What am I doing? They're next to my thank you cards. Like, this is stupid. But in the middle of the day, like 2 o'clock, I was just like, it's time to change my socks. I changed my socks, and I was like, wow, I feel refreshed and rejuvenated. And so rejuvenated. And I was ready to go to my next interview. And so it's a little silly trick. It's a little silly tip, but it helped me, and I hope it helps you just to give you that edge to make you feel the most comfortable in your interviews. So that is my presentation. I hope you got something out of it. I hope you were able to take a few nuggets of information away and to consider a little bit more about your job search. And so again, my name is Bryan Field. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me and ask. You can also post your question in the comments below. If you are a professional staff member and you're watching this and you're like, wow, I have some tips of my own that I would like to share, please put them in the comments below. This should be an interactive experience as much as we can. And so if you have your own tips and tricks that has helped you as a new professional land your first job, put them in the comments below, and we can share that with each other. So I would like to thank you all for watching, and I hope you explore more videos on this page for the virtual ACUHO-i Intern Summit. I wish you the best in your search, and yeah, thank you so much for tuning in. Bye-bye.